Gravity is a scientific concept. It is the tendency of masses and things to move as a result of attraction towards each other, such as the Earth and the Sun, and it also causes the fall of bodies and their stability on the Earth, and there is a direct relationship between the force of gravity and the force of things. It's common knowledge that gravity is involved in all things around us, but had you ever wondered what gravity means? Who is the discoverer of gravity and how? So, in this video, we will review all the information about Earth's gravity and its discoverer, Isaac Newton. Let's first talk about Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton was born in 1643 in Lincolnshire, Walsthorpe, England. He was born prematurely, 2 or 3 months before his normal birth date. He was the only son of a local writer, also named Isaac Newton. His father died 3 months before his birth. His mother, Hannah Esco, was semi-literate. 2 years after his father's death, his mother married the wealthy minister Barnabas Smith. Because the husband did not want Newton's child, his mother left him with his grandmother to look after him. This explains, for some authors, Newton's non-marriage. Newton was a sensitive child by nature, preferring to play with girls than boys. It didn't take long for his uncle to make sure Newton was unfit for agricultural work, so he sent him to school. Newton enjoyed both manual dexterity and brilliant intelligence, and was unable to build good relationships with other students, and this would be a feature of Newton's personality that accompanied him throughout his life. Newton was separated from his mother for 9 years, until the death of her husband Smith in 1653. His apparent aggressive tendencies were attributed to his emotional separation from his mother, which was a traumatic event for Newton's child. The information says that Newton hated his stepfather. When Newton assessed his spiritual condition in 1662, he wrote a short list of his sins, including, "My father and mother, Smith, threatened to burn them, and the house with them." An acute sense of insecurity, intense anxiety and irrational violence accompanied Newton throughout his life. He may be credited with his separation from his mother in his early years. Newton was a gifted and practical child. He enjoyed building some models, including a small windmill powered by a mouse running through a wheel. In 1661, Newton joined Trinity College in Cambridge as sizar, a poor student who was responsible for emptying the room's utensils and carrying firewood in exchange for free studies. This situation, which was considered particularly humiliating for a young man whose mother became wealthy after her second widow, did not change until 1667 when he became a fellow, who would receive a salary and a house. In 1665 the university was temporarily closed due to an epidemic of the bubonic plague, the Black Death, so Newton returned to his home in Lincolnshire and stayed there for about 2 years. He described that period as the beginning of my life in invention. The common story among a large group of people about the beginning of Newton's discovery of the law of gravity is that when he was sitting under an apple tree in the garden, an apple fell on his head vertically, and that writer who specializes in writing biographies, William Stockley, mentioned that he was sitting with Newton under some apple trees in the garden, and Newton told him that he was sitting meditating in the same position. When the apple fell on his head, he immediately wondered what force made the apple fall perpendicular to the ground. Why did it not go right or left or go up, which then prompted him to develop the law of gravitation, by creating a mathematical equation that determines the force of attraction between any two masses. After that, Newton saw that the planet Earth attracts the planet Moon with the same force that affected the apple. It is the force that varies in the inverse ratio of the square of the distance separating the Earth from the Moon. But Newton did not publish anything about his discovery, and will wait until 1687 to do so. He considered that it was nothing more than a hunch. He needed to improve his theory, particularly to prove that the Earth behaves towards surrounding objects, as if its mass were concentrated in its center. This required establishing a new branch of mathematics, calculus, and thus took time. Gravity is what causes a person to fall to the ground if he jumps, and makes things fall to the ground when they are thrown, as it is a hidden force that pulls things together. It is what keeps the human being fixed on the ground, and every body has a gravitational mass, and the greater the mass, the greater the gravity. Earth's gravity comes from its huge mass, and Earth's gravity is very important for all living organisms, and it is impossible to live without it. It keeps the Earth in its proper solar orbit to reach the sun's heat in the right amount for the Earth, and it also keeps the atmosphere constant, as it keeps the air that the Earth's life needs to survive. Newton invented the telescope, which was considered a revolutionary instrument, opening the doors to the Royal Society. There, he would meet the English natural philosopher and architect, and one of the Society's most important members, Robert Hooke, who would soon become his fierce enemy. In 1684, a visit by the English astronomer, mathematician, physicist and meteorologist Edmund Halley turned Newton's life upside down. This astronomer, who will be named after a famous comet, wants to know the trajectory of any planet if we assume that the force of attraction towards the Sun is inversely proportional to the square of the distance. Newton replies, "The ellipse, I figured it out," but he cannot find his notes and promises to recalculate. He then wrote De Motu Corporum Ingirum, a pamphlet that would form the basis of the future mathematical principles of natural philosophy, 1687, better known as the Principia. In fact, Newton's theory predicts that the Earth is slightly flat at the poles. But the Cartesians claim the exact opposite, based on faulty measurements. The dispute will be settled by geodetic measurements made by Charles Marie de la Condamine in Peru and Pierre-Louis Moreau de Maupertuis in Lapland. When the results proved that Newton was right in 1738, many scholars abandoned the Cartesians. Finally, in 1759, the return of the comet now called Halley, predicted by the calculations, would ensure Newton's victory. In 1704 Newton wrote his second great work, Optics, in which he advocated a physical view of light that contrasted with that of Christian Huygens, the proponent of the light wave theory. Newton also makes an important contribution to mathematics, particularly to the study of series and to the creation of calculus with Leibniz. Research by 20th-century historians proves that Newton secretly conducted countless chemistry experiments, tasted its mixtures, and poisoned himself with mercury. The experiments ended in 1693 with the explosion of his laboratory, where he almost lost his life. Newton died in his sleep in London on March 20, 1726. His body was buried in Westminster Abbey, and Voltaire may have been present at his funeral, and he died while he was celibate. He distributed much of his possessions to his relatives during his later years, died intestate, and his papers and writings went to John Conduit and Catherine Barton. After his death, Newton's papers were examined and found to contain mercury, and this may have resulted from his alchemical pursuits and mercury poisoning could explain Newton's deviation in his late life.